We're live.
Okay, we are live. Senate Education Committee, afternoon of April 8th. We are taking up for the first time H650, and we are doing what has become norm in this committee, the walkthrough before the introduction.
Right.
It's the way. Who says we have to do it the way everybody else does it?
I know. Maybe we're doing it the right way.
Yeah, that's right. So, and we have Rick Stimall with us and council, and we are ready. Floor is yours.
Okay, Rick Sagal with the Office of Legislative Counsel. So H650, I'll give a little bit of background. The bill, as it was introduced, was a much more comprehensive ed tech bill. It would have required not just registration of ed tech, but also regulation. The Agency of Education would have had to certify these products before schools could use them. So AOE came in and said this is maybe putting the cart before the horse, maybe for
What does that even mean? Certify these products?
Well, maybe I should talk more about ed tech in general, and Edie Fred Granny can explain that as well. But and we have definitions here, but and maybe let's just do that, and then as we get to the definitions, it might make more sense. So page 1, there is a before it gets to the ed tech section, there is a tech correction that I have in several bills because it's got to get somewhere. I really want it to pass. It's an enforcement provision in Title IX, which is the Commerce and Trade provision. And this is a different section about student privacy that the Assembly passed several years ago. And it's a correction because I explained this actually in Senate Economic Development earlier today, is the current wording chapter is incorrect. It should be subchapter. That would make the entire chapter subject to enforcement. So correcting that mistake, in my opinion, and then adding rulemaking was also, in my opinion, left out. Should have been given to the AG in that section as well. So that's not related to ed tech, but it's in the same title, same chapter. So I thought I'd go ahead and fix it there. Okay. On line 17, you have a new subchapter, educational technology. And so this is in Title IX instead of Title 16 because it is a regulation of a business of commerce. And this is Title IX is our commerce title in our statutes. So section 2444A, registration requirements, is the definition section. Definition of educational technology product and product means any student-facing software, application, or platform that may collect, process, or on the second page, transmit student data, and that is used for teaching and learning purposes in a school in Vermont. So fairly broad definition. It's any student-facing software, so not software that a teacher exclusively uses, has to be student software that is used for teaching and learning purposes. Number 2, filing is any type of really registration, amendment, report that a business does with the Secretary of State. When you register a business, that's a filing. When you file your periodic report, that's a filing. This will make more sense as I get to the bill. Number 3, provider of an education technology product and provider mean a person that provides an educational technology product that is in use at a school with or that a contract with a school or school district. So without a contract, would kind of loop in these freeware game software that school students may use.
So can we go back to page 1, line 20 that thing? So what's really going on here? This is we want to know, we want this product to be approved, or if it collects data on students. Is that the issue?
Not specifically, that's going to be part of it. I think the primary and recommending committee speak to the purpose of it better than I can, but I believe the intent here is to get a kind of picture landscape of what's happening in schools when it comes to ed tech, what they're using, and yes, eventually that software, is it taking students' data? Is it being sold? Are they being tracked? Are they being whatever, right? There's this whole other data privacy component that's not directly in the bill, but is the start of that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it, as introduced, would have been much more regulatory. This is not as regulatory. Yeah.
Okay.
You had on the Senate floor, you had the franchise bill today.
Yeah.
That's Senator Manos. Similar idea, where initially when it was introduced, that bill, which I also worked on, was very much heavily regulation of franchisers and franchisors. That was trimmed down to be basically just like, are you a franchisor, yes or no? To begin the conversation in later years. Okay, so on page 2, definition of school is a public or independent school approved by 16 VSA 166. B, mandatory data reporting. So in addition to all the requirements of a person registering with the Secretary of State pursuant to state law. So usually this would be a business that it registers as LLC or a foreign entity doing business here. A person doing business in the state as a provider of education technology products shall, at the time of a filing, provide the following: the name, primary, physical email, internet address of the person, a link to the most recent version of the privacy policy and terms and conditions of each product in use, the name of each school or school district in which the provider is operating pursuant to a contract, the name and a brief description of each product of the provider, also indicating which products are offered at no cost, which products are known to be used in any school or school district, and then finally, an attestation that each product meets the student privacy subchapter, which is, I can go over that next time if you want details, but that's kind of targeted advertising towards students, which is already in Vermont law, and the Vermont Age Appropriate Design Code Act, which was passed last year in Vermont, and all other federal and state privacy laws that may apply. So this is when they register or when they file a report, they would need to complete that information to give the state an idea of what's going on. So that's what's going in statute. Section 2 is the study of this kind of more intensive certification process. So AOE is given a task, and they're to consult with the Secretary of State, because remember, the Secretary of State is going to have all that registration information about these ed tech products. They're going to consult with schools and create a list of ed tech products in use across the state. Then they'll cross-reference those 2 lists to make sure that there's no missing pieces as far as any companies who haven't registered, but that are doing business in the state. And if there are these missing pieces, forward those names to the AG. Page 4, determine where assistive technology may be included in an individualized education plan. Provide a recommendation as to how the state should certify ed tech products for use in schools. So this is the big one here. Which state entities should be involved in the certification process and to what extent? The criteria to be considered in the certification process, which at the minimum shall include the product's compliance with state curriculum standards, advantages of using the product compared with non-digital methods, whether it was designed for educational use, and then some of the design features of the product, which are more sensitive information of students, geolocation tracking, where they are, use of AI, which includes chatbots, synthetic content, and automated decision-making tools, targeted advertising, personalized recommendation systems, so like an algorithm, access to adults unknown to a student, and features that would lead to compulsive use of the product. Page 5, whether the product serves as a beneficial assistive technology or provides some other form of benefit for special education purposes, and the data privacy practices of the provider of the product. Okay, so finishing up the certification review, the timeline and estimated cost to establish and implement the certification process, the cost or cost savings for schools, assuming that a certification process is established, and whether any third-party services, including Internet Safety Lab, should be utilized to assist in certification. The agency would also provide the General Assembly with any other information it deems relevant to help ensure that EdTech products are safely and smartly used in Vermont schools. So that report will be due on or before November 15th, 2027. your committees included, as well as the economic development committees and the House Education Committee. And the effective date would be July 1, 2026, which I actually want to check with the Secretary of State about if they can make that timeline work. As far as the registration component, they would have to update their, when you go to the website and you start a business, that's all kind of template and you type in the information. So this is kind of new data that they may want to have a bit more time to get that sorted out. So just something to think about. Go ahead.
Is there currently a list of tech tools that are authorized in the state?
So there's not really, AOE does have an ed tech, I call it division, but they do have an employee that is over that area. To my knowledge, there's not like an official list of approved ed tech products. So it's kind of school by school, perhaps school district by school, maybe teacher by teacher, how this is done.
So at the current moment, we don't have any law or standard that schools must follow when it comes to. As a teacher, I can bring in, hey, I think this is a great learning tool, and just bring it in.
That's my understanding.
Again, so page 4, line 7 starts with this paragraph B about criteria for certification process, and it goes down to essentially listing at a minimum, and then it goes down to design features, etc. In here, although line 10 kind of gets at it, I think the fundamental question is should be asked: what's the benefit to education? Like point blank. Not how it compares to digital, non-digital, but really, what's the benefit to the education system, from whatever, 10,000-foot view, as opposed to getting right into the details of data privacy and but I think the key issue is it relevant to Vermont students and why? Yep, I don't know, maybe.
Yes.
So this creates a permission-based system for the AOE.
So not this would require AOE to come back to you all and say this is what we recommend. We recommend, or maybe they say we don't recommend. They could come back and say we don't think this is going to work. That it should be up to the schools or should be up to the school districts. So it'd be up to them to come back to you all and kind of provide a recommendation.
So who has the rulemaking authority?
Right now, nobody, because there's no
Not in the bill. Nobody's recommending.
because there's no underlying. Sorry.
Well, there is a new consumer protection. Is that right?
No, so this is a previous subchapter. This is a technical ensuring that this student privacy, which is separate from this subchapter, is just because that's why I had that correction there. Is to make sure we're not giving the entire chapter of the Consumer Protection Act. So yeah, this is where the subchapter B, Ed Tech, is a separate entity.
Okay.
So I guess that maybe it's important to think what this bill does. It requires when you register in Vermont to do business here, which you have to do. If you are a business, even if you're incorporated in Delaware and you're located in Texas, however you're set up, if you do business in Vermont, you're supposed to register as a foreign entity at the very least. So when you do that, if you're XXX, that's a horrible acronym, ABC EdTech Company, you have to register and you would put ABC EdTech Company, and then you would fill in this information. You would not be regulated in any other way until there's this kind of certification process.
I'm not saying I disagree, but are you saying that every app that people use in Vermont is registered in the state?
If it's a business that has consumers and if they are doing business in the state.
So Resi has like a registration in Vermont.
I can't say they do or don't, but if I'm a lawyer advising a business and you have customers in a state, you should be registered as an out-of-state jurisdiction in the state in order to, so the state knows who you are. So you have an agent that you can be served with if you're sued.
Beatrice, I think you find they probably do. Makes a big.
Well, no, I mean, is this a Department of Financial Regulation question? Like
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, all the corporate filings are Secretary of State. So someone would look first with the Secretary of State if they were filed. And then they would be able to say, oh, I don't see them in the corporate filings registry. If they have a complaint, I think the complaint, not just about the filing, but about some illegal activity, or whatever, would go to DFR. I don't know where that would, or the AG.
So it would be a complaint about like ed tech specifically, or some other problem with the.
Well, I just don't know that we've said before that a technology product means any student facing application. That's every single application under the sun.
Well, but then there's the
Yeah.
last part is also important.
The which part?
So the entire sentence is may collect, process, or transmit student data, and that is used for teaching and learning purposes in a school in Vermont.
That may collect that if that is used for teaching and learning purposes. It's still pretty broad definition, right? Like I found my stepdad sent me like a new leadership quiz, and I was gonna send it out to like random colleagues and be like,
Right.
oh, you should take this. It's made by a Vermonter. I should
Right.
figure out what it's called. But if a student group was like, oh, you should take this quiz to understand like your leadership color style, what happens then?
So I guess the question is, does the definition need to be tightened up to not include these more informal uses of technology? To me, the intent at least is to capture what a teacher is using in his or her classroom, right? That we are gonna, or as an assignment, that you must use this website to complete the assignment, right? I think that's the intent.
Right. So this actually came up in a meeting I was in with members of the House where, a CTE teacher said, oh, I'm using this app to help, I'm encouraging students to use this app to look at job opportunities. Is the teacher liable for something?
Not in this bill.
Then the company needs to make sure they're registered.
Correct.
And in order to be registered, they have to meet these.
Yes.
So, like, I know a lot of schools in my district use Google or Chromebooks. Is this gonna get to the point where AOE will decide what you use for it? I know a lot of them get it, I think they're donated.
Yeah.
And by getting a donation, they get other software
Right.
applications. It's gonna narrow down the competition a little bit as far as once AOE says, this is what we want you to use for electronic devices in the school.
So it could, AOE does this study, right? They do the study and they could say, it's up to you all, right, to determine how this looks. They could say, we recommend that you certify ed tech products for use in schools and that we be a part of it or that we consulted, however they recommended. But you all, at the end of the day, are going to structure this in statute, presumably, that you actually come up with a way. So it could eventually, yes, you could say that products that meet this definition of ed tech have to be certified. And that could narrow down the field, right? If these products are selling student data, like if they're doing things you don't like, then they may not be allowed in schools.
Cause this has tentacles back to the kids' code and everything else.
They must attest that the products meet the standards of the Ferguson code. So you're not quite yet regulating them. This, I think, it's like a first step, right, to doing that.
So is there anything in statute right now that limits how expansive the approval for rulemaking can be for this?
So, I mean, again, there's no rulemaking. At this point, it's just a registration system where you have to fill in information. And if you don't, there's not really an enforcement in this piece. So the Secretary of State could say, hey, you're doing business. It's like any business. If you do business here and you're not registered, you're supposed to register with the state. I don't know what those penalties are, but there is a penalty. So that would be the enforcement, is that underlying thing you already have in the state. Nothing new here.
So is this all just coming back to us in the form of a report, or does the registration already take effect on its own now?
Registration is separate. That takes effect.
Takes effect.
Yeah, the study comes back.
There a fee.
No fee.
So it's free. It is free, or the fee just wasn't.
They would still pay for the filings. How much that money is, the file is a foreign entity.
Okay.
I don't know what that is.
And so at this point, we're gonna have a representative for that. But, so you're saying at this point, this doesn't impact what any school can do. It only impacts who can do business here. And
That's it.
Yeah, it does requires, if you are providing, and Senator Robbins actually made a good point earlier, saying that how they're gonna know that they're doing business here. That is a question. Like if you're an ed tech provider and you make an app that's just on the app store, how do you know if Vermont schools using it? Well, you know where your data is being used and you see where they're being downloaded. So they probably do know that we do have people in Vermont using our app.
I mean, this reminds me of
Yeah.
sports betting, where we had to. I mean, we could then see that over 50% of the people using the app in our state were visitors. So, like, maybe every app maker at this level is very sophisticated and knows what they're dealing with. But, and I'm not saying like if 5 people are using it in the state, they're going to get, sued or enforced against. But I do feel like this opens up a huge new definition of what we mean by a student-facing application.
well, why don't we hear from the sponsor? Let's fly around. Just do this for a little while. It's up to you. Or the sponsor report is not sure.
Both.
Both, yeah.
Super. Hi, Edie Granning, Jericho and Underhill, and thank you for having the time today. I have you on my calendar for tomorrow, so I apologize. That was the invitation was sent for, so. So this is a bill that is designed to provide information for us. What we know is that education technology has grown in multiples to become a multi-billion-dollar industry in a very short amount of time. It was around before COVID, but once COVID hit and we went to online learning, it turned into something very different. It is fully unregulated. It is just like the supplement industry, where people can make assertions, they test their own equipment, they set up whatever information and marketing that they need to based on their own testing, and they're using our kids as that test market. So because it is unregulated, because it is an industry that we know very little about, what we wanted to do was set up a system that we can figure out what's happening in the state. And so we worked with the Secretary of State's office to say, can we have the business register that they have and buy product, right? So if you have an educational technology product that is being used in the state, do you have the ability to even register that so we know who's in the state? And because we have invested in upgrades, they can do that starting in January. So that was a huge win to even be able to understand what's happening. And then we talked to the Agency of Education and said, are you interested in helping us figure out what makes sense to even be used in our state, in our classrooms, based on what is trying to be taught, figuring out who can partner with to make sure that these products are doing what they say they're going to do. And they are very focused on data privacy right now. And there's a consortium of states that work together on this. And about 2/3 of our schools are part of this consortium, 1/3 roughly are not. But there is no, and they have one person who is responsible for education technology in the state. And so the question for us then to them is, what would it take for you to be able to get that information back and figure out how to make sure these products are doing what they say, which ones should be allowed to be used in our schools. And that's what the report is. What would it cost? What kinds of partners would you need? Please get back with us. We know this is the very beginning. And so that's what this bill is. It's a starting point for us to be able to down the road support, because right now it's costing so much money. Every single school is figuring this out in a different way. And they're they're often coming to the same conclusion. But it's the most expensive way to do it because every school has different groups of teachers and administrators working on what would work for you.
So when you say which products are approved, I mean, aren't there just like, isn't it just exploding? So how do you, there's another one tomorrow, how do you keep up with it, and how does anybody make sense of it?
Yeah, and that's not something that the legislature really can do, right? But we need our agency, we need our agency of education to figure that out and to say, you know, maybe there's another multi-state consortium that could help at least tell us which products are actually doing what they say they're doing, which ones are actually effective in helping kids to learn. Right now, they can say, like I said, whatever they want, backed by whatever test they choose to do.
So if somebody wanted to introduce a product in Vermont, whereas today they could just do it. Under this regimen, it might take them 6 months to get for.
No, under this bill, all they would have to do is register the same way they register at the Secretary of State's office, and that
It's
takes
certified.
minutes.
It's certified.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they would have to know that we have state laws. That might take them a little bit longer. We found that there are a lot of places don't even know that we have state laws around how to, and they would, so that's one thing that would be really important.
How would the agency know? But isn't the second part of this for the agency to approve? So that would take time, which not would it?
So so what we need is for them to tell us what it would cost to set up a system to figure that out, what would be approved. And so until we have them do that research, we don't know. And so all we're asking from them is a report, like, what would it cost? What kind of partners would you need? How would this go forward if we were to choose to regulate these entities in a different way, or to limit which ones can be used in our classrooms? So this is a consumer protection bill.
Yeah, no, I get it all.
So
I'm
it's-
just thinking about the like landscape changing every day, and how do we ever keep up with it? But anyway, yeah.
So, I mean, I wanted to try and follow up like a case study and you
Yeah.
tell me what you think. So, I mean, I know a lot of high school and college professors who are trying to teach kids digital literacy around AI, right? They may not condone the use of ChatGPT as a academic tool, but they want students to be literate in understanding where it can be helpful, how to make sure it's a tool and not replacing your thinking capacity, right? So I just searched in the corporate filings page for the Secretary of State's office, OpenAI, right? I get Open Air Jiu-Jitsu, I get Open Air Pet Repair, but I also get OpenAI LLC in San Francisco at the bottom. And it's the only one of the 12, the other ones are local businesses. It's the only one that says status canceled. I don't know what that means, but tell me, how would this bill treat ChatGPT or any teacher in high school who said, I want you all to understand what ChatGPT can and cannot do for you?
Yep. So ChatGPT is not a tool that is designed and used for learning specifically. So it wouldn't even be part of this bill. It would be one of those things that is designed to teach, I don't know, spelling or math, or, something that is designed.
Rick, because it says that is used for teaching and learning purposes in a school.
So again, Rick Sagel, Budget Council, I'm looking at the definition on the bottom of page 1. means any student-facing software application or platform that may collect, process, or transmit student data. ChatGPT, I think could
Student facing
student-facing,
that. say-
which student-facing software application or platform that may collect, process, or transmit student data, and that is used for teaching and learning purposes. So you could argue that, like, if it's teacher had a lesson, this is which I used to teach. I can imagine. I can imagine doing that. So yeah, I think maybe tying up that definition maybe.
I know, I've heard of a teacher, maybe through an intern of mine, that, and this was a high school, you know, write it yourself and then write it through ChatGPT to see the difference, right? Like, I'm not saying ChatGPT shouldn't register, but like, I don't think the definition is that clear about what it means to be student facing. I'm sure a lot of students are facing ChatGPT, and what it means then for a school or a teacher to potentially lose academic freedom or not be able to teach digital literacy.
Yeah, so there's nothing about the intent of the bill
Right. But
that is supposed to
words on the
limit
page.
that, right? And
So we need to probably put intent language into statute that says this would not capture
because
X, Y, or Z.
yeah, I mean, we want to make sure that we're teaching kids how to be functioning adults in the current century, right?
Yes, we do.
And so that's super important to
Yeah.
consider. So if
And I
that definition-
teach, so I mean, it's a
Yeah,
university level, so I don't
right.
think
So
this is all,
so
but
this
still,
wouldn't
like,
apply to that, to college. This is,
I want to make sure we're talking to teachers, like, do they feel like they're not liable for anything here, but would their freedom to teach using different tools be dampened?
so that would depend on what the agency of education eventually, right, comes up with. Because this, first we need them to do a report on what would it cost for them to be able to put any kind of system in place that lets us know what products are effective for which ages and which ones are.
I thought we were asking businesses to register.
Yeah,
So how do they know they're a education business?
if they're, so this is their product designed to help students learn anything?
So if
That's the-
anybody.
That's not
can
what
get
it doesn't say. It says used for teaching and learning, not designed to teach and learn.
Well, used for, yeah, but I mean, if they're. It's not often that a product is gonna be used for teaching and learning, right? Used in a classroom for teaching and learning. It isn't designed for that purpose.
I mean, this is why it's in the education city though, because I think that does happen fairly frequently. If you're doing anything related to current events or, you know, you use a lot of tools that aren't like
Like,
web, whatever, the Blackboard or, you know, the tools that are designed for schools.
In high school and middle school and elementary school.
Yeah,
So it's-
yeah, because I mean, most teachers that make
So-
students come alive are trying to teach them using current relevant tools and how to make sense of the world.
You probably need a different person in this chair to talk about that.
so, Senator Lewis, let Senator Lewis jump in.
So if any student has access to the internet, they can use ChatGPT in school. So are we talking about policy that's going to limit schools from students getting access? You know, would it be through the school server that they would have to?
Yeah, this bill requires those entities that are used for educational purposes to register at the Secretary of State's office. That's all this bill does. And then it asks the Agency of Education to come back to us with suggestions on what the next steps would be. And what the cost to implement those next steps would be.
Unless we
So
want
it's
to have any policy.
basic, we don't have the tools yet. We don't have, it's too new of an industry, but we know that our kids are the guinea pigs in these test products, the test for these products today.
All right, so just to make sure, because there is I can see the point being made here, the distinction. I think your intent is for your two products that are designed to be used in school. And just the way that it reads when it says used, and there's probably I think what Senator Ron Christo's getting at is that there's a potential big gulf between the two things. Use and design and design for, but the intent is designed for use in schools.
The intent is to make sure that the students in our state are not being used as, yeah, guinea pigs.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
Okay, so I was trying to save it with page 2 where it says provider of an educational technology product. A person that provides an educational technology product in use at a school. And then this is the problem, because I was going to say the way to fix this would be to say they have a contract with the school or the school district. But it says with or without a contract with the school district. That continues to be extremely broad. So what was the intention with trying to include a technology product in use at a school without a contract with the school district? That's like the internet. That's everything.
it's their free products,
Okay.
and what the way they make money is by collecting and selling.
But don't they
data.
still have a contract with the
They
school?
don't have to.
Okay, I mean, we could say if you're a school, you need to have a contract for things that are,
it's been problems.
I don't know how to use
But
it,
also that's-
everything.
But it's so far down the road,
Yeah.
right? We don't even know the number of products that are being used in the state.
This is the
So
first
this
step,
is the first step.
just to get people to register so we know what they're using. And if they're not registered, they can't use it.
Does another state have this?
Not yet. No, it's actually being used as a model policy in a number of other states right now.
It needs to be a good model then. It needs to have definitions that work.
But we're setting involved.
Well, but the registration piece has some pretty good definitions, and if there are ways to tweak it to make it better, then absolutely you should do that. But that's the consumer protection piece, right? That's the, how do we make sure that businesses that want to do business in the state of Vermont register appropriately and follow our rules?
So just to pull it apart a little bit more. Is it that we don't want our kids used as guinea pigs, or is it that we want to protect their data?
Isn't it both?
Both. Because
We have laws.
there are circumstances under which being used as a guinea pig might not be a bad thing. Perhaps, I mean, I don't know.
I,
But you should know that you are being used.
Yeah, you at least want to know things. That's fair enough.
but
Yeah.
you should choose, right? You should choose to say, yes, I want to test this product. I want to be a beta tester. And you should have certain protections as, part of being that beta tester. But
Protections adhere, would they adhere with the school deciding under those circumstances where it was supposed to know what they were doing to make that decision? Or would you see?
you're asking today or down the road? I don't,
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
yeah.
Is it the agency, the school, or individual kids?
I mean, it is such a new industry right now. I mean, it's really taken off in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So we're at a point where we can make an impact. But until we know who is even acting in the state, right? That's really the first step. And we're really fortunate to have the Secretary of State's office be in a position where they can register to the product level.
We do,
They weren't able to do that. They aren't able to do that actually today, but they will be able to do that by January.
but I do want to clarify, the kids code right now would stop any platform operating in the state from collecting and selling children's data.
Oh, I'll chime in. Maybe. So Kids Code takes effect January 1 of 2027. The AGs do rulemaking as well to kind of beef up how that actually works in reality. So it's true, but they would have to be a covered business. And is this ed tech provider a quote unquote covered business under the Kid Code law? That would be up to each business if they meet the definition of a covered business. So if they do meet that definition, then yes, they'd be prohibited from a number of things, including selling the data of a minor. So that's why in the bill, they have to attest to adhering to Kids Code. But it's not a new regulation. It's saying that, look, we have this, it's actually more of this law's on the books. You should be aware of it. Make sure you follow this law that already exists. So that's my answer is in defense on food businesses.
It's the first step that you open Pandora's box.
Well, I think the box is already
It is
open.
already.
I think it's opening our eyes to Pandora's box.
Yes. Seems like a huge effort. And I understand this in the state, but the first testimony ought to be, does the kids code to already address the fundamental impact, negative impacts that you're concerned about in Bill? Because if AOE would have to settle them all and be evaluating software on a daily basis to see if to kind of carry the leading edge of technology as it expands, just seems like a huge effort. Yeah, but I'm curious if we've already covered what kids with it.
So two things, right? So, there is at least one nonprofit that is not funded by big tech that is looking at evaluating products and how at least at a minimum, the privacy settings work and the data collection works. So the agency wouldn't have to do this on their own. There are partners involved that they would have to they could work with in that situation.
Right. Well, that's
So
all funding and
And
it's all about funding, really. You know, that's labor, but we have to fund that labor. We don't get anything. Regardless of a nonprofit's
yeah, yes.
altruistic tendencies.
But also, this would explicitly say, if you're an education product provider, right? If you're an education
Yeah,
technology
so that's a
provider,
really
you
fuzzy
have to,
definition.
you have
That's
to
from the
follow.
previous question. So that's really fuzzy. And I'd be very tough to nail down. I'm just curious if this is even necessary given kids code. I think that's a good starting point. If we're already covered, if kids are covered and kids using software, which, you know, their teachers might advocate, should we all still be covered? Sure.
So there is another question, which is, and this is when you have secretary of state, well, you probably won't have the secretary of state, maybe you will have secretary of state, I don't know how you do that, sure. If they can, in their new system that is coming online shortly, have different fee structure for education products, and that can help fund enforcement, that will be really beneficial with these laws, because we want kids code and other protections for kids to be funded and enforced well. And so again, this is that first step in having the businesses register at the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you.
Yes.
So if either guidance counselors or mental health counselors use apps for, you know, job search or career tech, you know, exploration, or even mental health, is that covered in your definition?
It shouldn't, it shouldn't be looking for a job, shouldn't.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why is there not doing that in school?
Even if they are.
They are doing it at school.
Okay.
It's facing students and it's happening at school.
Well, we'll go back to the cell phone thing, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me ask a quick question before he goes,
Yeah.
because I don't have to do it right now. But
I have to go work.
how hard is it to sort of do it, I don't mean literally side by side, but effectively a side by side with the kids code? Sure. Just to get a sense of where there is and isn't overlap, because I think it's both, perhaps.
Yeah.
But let's find out where that is.
Have to do that for the committee.
Okay.
And also understanding that the AG is going to have more information, rulemaking. They're getting a lot of authority over that. So, but I'll provide you with statutory comparison.
It's just,
Yes.
Troy, it's where there's a obvious question is where is the overlap? Yeah, okay.
Can I ask about one more overlap?
It's up to him.
It's
gotta go.
Data brokers.
Yeah.
Because it says collect, process, or transmit student data. per kids code and the data broker language, I'm sure we'd want to know that anyone who processes student data is registered.
Right.
And I don't know if they'd all be considered data brokers.
So because they're a first party interaction, they would not be a data broker. It'd be if that company then sold it to another entity that we're not aware of behind the scenes, they would be the data brokers. So that first party interaction with you and Canvas, Blackboard, they're not a data broker. They are a first party business that you're dealing with.
But they should be telling us right now if that data is being sold to somebody else per our other laws.
Vermont laws? Not yet.
If they're under 18.
January.
For kids code, yeah, kids code January, but for adults, there's no other data.
Oh, I'm talking about kids because
Yeah. January 1st.
So everyone who collects, processes, or transmits student data to be sold, or sells it in any way,
Prohibited. I will double
is
check.
prohibited.
But I would double check for you. Yes.
So they would only be able, this bill would still only mean they could do it if they were transmitting it or holding on to it for something that had no monetary gain.
In this bill?
Yeah.
In the registration bill? It would just be, do you do this? Do you share with a third party for processing, which would be allowed under kids code, right? Do you have a third party that processes your information, not sell it, right? You have the processor, because if we're technical here, but they would be able to do that in kids code. They would not be able to share it with a third party for another nefarious reason, if that makes sense. For
Or
advertising, monetary advertising would occur. Yeah. I think it will help to have that kids code comparison for me too, so we can all look at it and kind of see.
Then we can go back through the bill with what we served to today and go line by line. Yeah, I think I get what you're looking to do. Thank you. Thank you.
Again, apologize, I wasn't here earlier. I will take you off my calendar for
That's okay.
tomorrow.
That's okay.
Come tomorrow if you want.
So we actually have, we'll take a 15-minute break, but for what it's worth, at more lunch, I put yellow highlight on our bills that are, I should pay attention to the ones that are kind of active. That came over from housing. The only one that's not there because it doesn't have any place to have it is the Act 73 bill. And on that score, the House is supposedly voting that bill out of Ways and Means this week. So that can become actually our vehicle. But we'll keep working. So that just so you know, so if you're looking through, those are our active bills. And we got one off the ages by sending it over the finance. So we can go off for 15 minutes or however, for 10